My final weeks 4 and 5 for prompts for Dephemerember with Louisa Heinzel and 49 Dragonflies. Hi everyone, Patty here with my take on the prompts. Altered book page, blackout poetry, photo frame and steampunk butterfly, along with a double tag and mechanical garden. Collage postcard and curiosity shot may be my favorite prompt. Envelope flip and secret love letter, and last and least favorite mixed media tag and urban graffiti. I had such high hopes for that one, and it just didn't turn out like what I was thinking. We start off with the altered book page and blackout poetry. I find if I read the pages as if I'm reading the story in the book, I have a really hard time finding the words to make any kind of saying or poem. I just have to look for words and see what goes best. I thought this font was really different from this book, but when I read it, well, it was a bit disturbing and not the sort of thing I would want in my journal, let alone read a book about. Maybe it's best that I'm using it for a blackout poem because most of it is blacked out. I did find some words that made some sense and would work. I put a block around them with a pencil so I wouldn't mark over them with the felt tip pen, even though I went right over one word that I wanted to keep, but I did go around it with my pen so you can see the word hidden in the blacked out area. The words I found were, most people have a challenge, passion, devotion, love, or affection. After I blacked everything out, I had an open space and decided to cut out a heart out of the book paper to add to the open space. I cut out 3 hearts. I want the text to be going the same way and not upside down. I want 3 hearts that increase in size stacked on top of each other. So I traced the heart and made a bigger one and cut out a smaller one from the center. This gave me the 3 hearts that I could stack on top of each other. Inked around the edges with Faded Jeans Distress Oxide ink. I went ahead and inked around the whole set of hearts and glued them together. After I glued them together, I cut them down the center and only used half of the stacked hearts to fill in the void space on the blackout poem. I was debating on putting on half of the hearts on one side and the other half on the other side of the page, but decided that was too much and took away from the page instead of adding to it. A silver pin around the edges helped with the uneven lines, and I added a few more silver lines down the sides of the page and on the side of the page where I had glued down the hearts, giving a bit more interest to my page. A little silver around the hearts to give some highlights. I ran around the hearts with my Inktense pencils from Derwent in black and used my watercolor pens that hold water to smudge the Inktense pencil and blend the black ink around the edges to give it a highlighted look along with the blue Faded Jeans Distress Oxide ink that I had inked around the edges. This made the heart stand out nicely and gave me a focal point on that all blue blacked out page. I find a page to put it into my journal. We are ready to start on the photo frame and steampunk butterfly. I have this stencil with chains, clocks, and gears that I used on the background of a page in my journal. I don't need it to stand out a lot, but just don't want a plain brown page to start with. I use walnut stained distress ink on the stencil adding some areas around the outside of the page, a little heavier with stain than the center area. My photo frame is a clip art frame from the Digital Collage Club that I am a member of making and creating. I fussy cut it out and cut out the center of the frame and ink around the edges in the walnut distress ink. Decide how the frame will fit onto my page and glued it down. Lay out my idea and see how it's going to fit and work onto my page. The butterfly will have gears for one of the wings that I have, and the other gears I'll glue around the outside of the frame with smaller butterflies. Trying to decide what color of tiny butterflies to use and end up going with the blue ones. The wood butterfly needs some color to match my blue theme, so I find my re-inkers in the different colors of blue that I have and squirt a few drops of the blue onto the wood butterfly. Spritz this with some water to get the oxides to do their thing and let this dry. Gluing the gears to the broken wing of the butterfly and adding gears and tiny butterflies to the page. I use clock hands for the antenna of the butterfly. I like the visual arrangement of this page with the focal point directly in the middle of the page, creating a circular emphasis around the center frame. Really draws your attention to this steampunk butterfly. The page is a bit bulky in a journal, so I wanted it to be the first page on the signature, because it usually has more space with the signatures being sewed into the journal. I try to leave space between my signatures so the journal will lie flat when using the pages. Next, we tackle the double tag and mechanical garden. This one was fun. I added a little color to some wax paper that already had some brown inks on it from stenciling. I added some blue color and spritz with water to dip my page into and get a little background color on my watercolor paper I chose to use. It's a heavier weight paper and will hold up to a tag with mechanical elements. I get ink on both sides of the paper, and I'm hoping some of the browns will come through also. I crumbled up some more wax paper and tried to get a distressed look of the inks on the page as I dabbed off some of the ink in some areas. Let this dry. I started with a stencil that is a fun garden flower stencil using my distress oxide pads in greens, teals, purple, and blue. I believe this stencil is from Stencil Girl Products. I use my makeup brushes through the stencil and do the flower heads and seed pods in the brighter colors, and use the peeled paint, forest moss, and frayed burlap for the stems and grassy part of the stencil. I use this stencil on both sides of the watercolor paper because this is a double tag and it will be seen from all sides. Now to cut the watercolor paper into some tags. My tags are 4 inches by 7 inches. Cut 2 pieces the same size. Cut the top of the tags and reuse the piece flipped over to cut the angle on the other side of the tag. I used some of the packaging tape that we did in one of the other videos to hinge the 2 tags together. This vintage tape has come in handy with my journals. I will need to make more of it. I have a little piece of watercolor paper left from cutting the tags and save this piece for added grassy parts after I get the mechanical flowers on the page. Attach the tags together using the vintage tape. Lay the second tag next to the first tag with the tape and tape the 2 together. Use another piece of vintage tape on the center of the tag and cut off any excess tape. I arrange some gears on my page to see how many will fit and what size of gears I want to use for my mechanical garden. I have a couple in silver, one in a teal oxide color, couple in copper. Find my wire to make a few stems and to wrap around the gears. I wrap the wire tight around the gears, but you could leave them with a bigger loop that would look like large petals on the gears. Oh, I've got to try that. See, that's what Dephemerember does to you. The next thing you know, you're down a rabbit hole making tin of something, or changing your idea and expanding on it, and the next thing you know, you're in January filming December prompts. Did anybody else do this? I sure did this year. I wrapped and twisted the double wrapped and some places triple wrapped wire around a little funky leaf or some sort of wire and just had a play with my mechanical garden. It's hard to pick a favorite prompt this year, but I enjoyed this one very much. The tags ended up being pretty bulky, but I make a clear pocket for it after the fact to showcase it off better than what I show here, but you will get to see that when I do the complete flip through of the journal next week. After I got the gears all wire wrapped, I used some of my art glitter glue and glued the wrapped gears to the tag. One gear fits perfectly on a stenciled flower, so I don't even wrap it or give it a stem. These need to be weighed down to get them to dry flat after gluing them, tops and bottoms. I printed off the freebie that Louisa gave us with all the gears, sat and fussy cut a bunch of the gears while watching TV one night and used these for the front of my tags. I didn't want to add any more thickness with more gears and wire. I even cut out some of the long pieces from the gear page for stems and leaves. Glued these pieces together, layering them and inking around the edges to get rid of any white edge I may not have cut off. Made one big flower and a couple small ones along with a few gears I had cut out from die cuts and glued these together to make a few flowers. I didn't put anything on the back of the tag, only the stencils shows on it. After I got everything glued together, I decided I need to make something to cover up the bottom of the flowers with the leftover piece of watercolor paper that I'd cut off when making the tags. I folded the piece in half and cut out the top portion into some grassy looking pieces with sharp angles and some longer and skinny, some fatter and wider. This will fit over the top and inside piece to cover up the wire stems on the inside and give a dimensional look to the front of my tag. Inked it all up with peeled paint, making sure the tips are a little darker. Glue on both sides of the grassy piece and adhere it to the tag, making sure it is tight up to the bottom of the tag. Did this to both sides of the double tag. Now those wire bottoms of the stems won't get caught on anything. The top is a piece of eyelet trim that I have for my steampunk journals. I make along with some chain that my granddaughter made for me for the top. I had to have a big piece of loop to go into the topper to be able to attach the chain for the top. Added a jump ring and put a little butterfly onto my garden tag. Let's find a place to put it. Like I said, I do change it, and you'll get to see it next week when I do a flip through of the journal, final journal, and all of the prompts. We're ready for the collage postcard and curiosity shop. I have some postcards from my great auntie's travels and decided to enlarge a couple of them so I could make a large postcard with the idea that I will be having here. Here again, I can't just make one of these. I need to make two because I'm working on an apothecary journal, and this, along with the mini pocket letter and specimen cards in week 3, will go nicely with it. I cut the postcards out and printed this digital I purchased from Etsy in half size. They don't fit perfectly, so I thought I should use the same stencil and put something on the background. But in the end, you could skip this step because you can't see anything the way I glued the inside pieces to the postcard. Only the edges needed something, not the whole postcard. I spritzed them with water after using the oxide inks and got some variations in colors. Looks really nice, but it gets covered with the digitals. Inked the edges in walnut stain ink and really made this a thick inking just in case the digitals didn't fit. I printed off the freebie that Barbara gave us with the locks and keys for the very first prompt and tried to see which would look the best for the opening of the curiosity shop cabinet. Glued the background pieces I chose to the postcard and wiped off any excess glue. Did this to both postcards. Trimmed off any excess paper so it didn't show on the postcard side. Ink those edges again and figure out how the top layer will fit with the curiosity shop cabinet. Used the decal edge cutter to cut the cabinet in half, thinking I could get it further to the edges this way. you need an edge to put the hinges. I purchased these tiny hinges from Amazon. They came in 2 sizes, and they lay fairly flat so they don't bulk up my pages in my journal too much. The only thing is each hinge takes 4 brads, so I have to search for 16 brads, the same size and color for each postcard. I'm still struggling on what lock to use for the front of the Curiosity Shop cabinet. Tried cutting out this piece, but it's way too large and won't work. Ink more edges for the white doesn't show. I marked all of the holes for the hinges and put tiny holes on the postcard and the Curiosity Shop cabinet cover page. Some of my brads aren't the right color, and I had more of these bright gold ones, so I counted 16 and used my alcohol inks to change the tops of them and tone that bright gold down. Fixed each brad into the hinges and flattened out the prongs onto the back of the postcard. I did this to all the hinges on both cards, fitting the Curiosity Shop cabinet front piece into the marked holes. When I hinged it open, the prongs of the brad show through, and I was afraid they wouldn't stay in place. I printed out a couple more pages from this digital kit in half size and cut pieces to fit the cabinet doors on the inside and covering up the prongs of the brads. Glued these pages to the inside of the cabinet doors. This helped with making the doors to the cabinet stronger also, and will open and close nicer. Ink those edges, and I didn't cut the end pieces. This I had it all after I had it all glued together, and then I used my decal edge cutter to cut the excess piece from the cabinet doors. Now to figure out which of these locks to use. There are so many good choices. A couple of the books on the Curiosity Shop cabinet have a little green in them, so the vintage antique locks look the best in the inn. Only glue one little section of the front on one side of the cabinet door so it opens nicely. Okay, these are my favorites so far. Now where to put one of them into this journal. A leftover piece of paper from the digital kit and fashioned a tuck spot to adhere to the postcard. Reinforced it with extra cardstock and glued it down on two sides because I thought the postcard was too big to fit into a pocket. On to envelope flip and secret love letter. I made several of these envelopes to put into journals, so down the rabbit hole I go. First, I want to make some designer fabric to cover the book pages with and add some interest to a normally plain book page envelope. I have an old cotton dish towel that I have stained in distress inks and blue. Lay this flat and start stamping on it. I like to put several stamps on an acrylic block and stamp several at a time. Some stamps are going to be upside down and some will be sideways. I have to find a larger acrylic block for the lupin stamp I have because I think the stamp will look great down the pages in my journal if I can get a clear stamp impression. I've been looking into one of those stamping platforms. Do you have one and do you use it or like them? Leave a comment in the box and let me know if it's worth the purchase of one of these. After I get the material all stamped, I add my square book pages to the back of the stamped designer material. Cut these pieces out and trim around all the edges. I go back and add a little more glue to the corners, making sure all of the material is glued to the book page. Fold the square into an envelope by folding the center pieces into the center of the envelope. Fold up the bottom and fold down the top to make an envelope. I want both of the envelopes to be the same size and preferably square. It took me a few refolds to get them both the same size. These were so cute, so I made a couple tiny envelopes to use in another journal. Make sure both envelopes are approximately the same size. Glue the side flaps down and the bottom flap to make your envelope. To make the round disc, I thought I could use my hole punch and go through the material in a couple layers of cardstock, but that made a big mess in the hole punch. I used my glue stick for a template and drew the circles out onto the material covered cardstock. Cut 4 of these out. The holes are approximately 1-inch holes. I inked around the edges to really good so it would cover up the not so round shape. Put a hole in the center of the 1-inch holes into the 1-inch holes to add a brad. Find some string to add for the attachment of the holes and glued just in the center of the holes with the brad and string to add to the front of the envelope. These need to be weighted down to dry flat. I only put string around one of the envelopes, 1-inch hole punch. Now to figure out which page to add my flip envelope to my journal. Set the 2 envelopes that are matching in size onto your page. Glue the top flap down where the envelope can flip up and you can get items out of the envelope. Line them up on the page and make sure they fit nicely and open with a flip up and flip down. I add the love letter. I explained in week 3, flip out page and old photo. I found this along with a picture of a beautiful woman in an old book. This letter is dated 1947, and it is the words to the song, You Are My Sunshine. To me, the words are a perfect love letter. I folded it to fit into the envelope and tucked it into one of the openings. Use the string to tie the 2 envelopes together. You will see in the flip through the book page I add under the envelopes and did another blackout poem to it. So when you flip it up, you have something more hidden to see. The last prompt is mixed media tag and urban graffiti. I suppose at this point I tried the easy way out and printed off some digitals I'm working on for my no date February planner. They have these big alcohol ink flowers with gold, and one page to me looks just like the trains that go by in our area, all covered with graffiti. I printed the word graffiti in gold onto the tag, thinking I could use my Versa marker pen to emboss the word in gold and go around the tops of the flowers to match the big words they use on the trains. I have a picture of the trains, but don't get too close up of a shot because I suppose these are gang-related symbols and who knows what type of thing I could be promoting. But anyway, the Versa marker pen is brand new pen, and it's so dry I tried dipping it into my embossing ink pad and using it to write with. Tried to do all the letters first, that didn't work. Tried to do one letter at a time, that didn't work. Made a mess. Tried to go around it with my black micro pens that gummed them all up. Used a black gel pen, and that seemed to work to go around the letters and help them stand out a bit more. I ended up making E's and not F's, and well, I wasn't on a roll at all to finish this prompt up. I cut a couple pieces of the yellow snippet roll I used in a couple of the prompts and added a couple circles to make it look like wheels on the trains. Stamped them to the tag and tried to cover up the E's that were to be F's. So in the end, I think I fixed a failed tag into something that will work in my journal. Find a page to add it and can't wait to show you the complete flip through. Hope you had as much fun this year with Dephemerember as I did. Have a great day. Bye now.